Reconnecting is very important because it's where I had my very first physical encounter with God and with the Beacon Church, whom I now belong to. 7 years ago I went down to a canal boat rally, and there was an open air church service there, and I'd been looking for some kind of peace, but I didn't know what it was for. And I first encountered Jesus at the Beacon service that was held at that boat rally, and it still holds a connection for me now. When I was young, we all went to church. We went on a Sunday, and I loved going to Sunday school. And how do I know I loved it? Because I used to go every week, and we used to get books for going there every week and for the attendances. And I always remember reading the stories of Joseph and Jesus and really enjoying them. As I grew up, obviously things changed, and I found myself going to church less and less for whatever reason, I don't know. And it became a weddings and funerals type of church life. And as I grew older, I found that God took a further backseat than he should, but he did, and life went on. And I married very young, and I married in church, and I had to marry in church, and I didn't know why, but I just had to marry in church. Looking back at my past, I was bullied at school, and I think I was just looking for love. And 6 weeks before we got married, something happened that meant we shouldn't really have got married, but it was too far down the line, and mums and dads had paid for all the wedding and what have you. So we ended up getting married. And the marriage lasted 4.5 years, and it ended not very nicely. I had no ties. We weren't blessed with children, and I moved. I took myself lock, stock and barrel down to London, and I moved to London, and I led a life of Riley for, as they say, for a number of years. God didn't figure in my life at all. And I had money, and I spent money, and I enjoyed myself, or what I thought was enjoying myself, by spending money on people and presents for people and things, and that was how I led my life. After that, I met my second husband, and we married, and we moved up to Scotland, and we had a nice time in Scotland, and we had a nice life together. And we had good jobs and lots of money, and we could afford nice things, and it was great. But I guess I was always looking for something that I didn't know what it was. I had a very good job, I had a managerial position, but something happened at work that was very stressful, and I struggled to cope with it. And I began to drink. It was just the odd one, glass of wine after work. Started just a glass of wine or two, and then it became half a bottle, and then from a bottle, and it got worse. And I couldn't sleep, so I'd have a drink to help me sleep. And it was very stressful. But the marriage was struggling. We didn't, we struggled, and because of my drinking, and it became a point where we couldn't carry on. It wasn't fair on me, and it certainly wasn't fair on my ex-husband. So we decided to split. And this was about 8 years ago now. And I moved to Whitchurch, and the problems didn't disappear, and I still kept drinking. And the more I drank, the more I needed to drink, and the less I could cope at work, so the more I drank, and I found myself in a dreadful spiral, and my life just became an absolute mess. It came to a point where I realised that I had to do something. I was losing complete days, complete blackouts. I didn't know what I'd been doing. I would wake up covered from top to toe in bruises, and I didn't know what I'd done to get them. So I took counselling. I was not coping at work. I had to go off work with stress, and I was off work for about 6 months. Towards the end of it, I realised that I needed to go away. I wanted a complete break. I had stopped drinking by this point. I decided I needed a holiday. So I had to go to Rome. I don't know why I had to go to Rome, but Rome drew me. So I booked a holiday. Booked it 1 week and went the next week. I went to Rome, and for 4 days I walked the streets of Rome. I took my camera, a brand new camera that I bought myself, and I took pictures. I love to take pictures. But I found myself drawn, and there are so many churches in Rome, and I found myself drawn to all the churches, and every church that I walked past, I took a picture of, and I had to go in. If the door was open, I went in. And I just found myself just drawn to the peace of the peace of the churches, and the feeling that I had when I was inside the churches was just, it was unexplainable. And I couldn't explain why, but I lit candles. I went into quiet places and prayed. It's something that I hadn't done for years, but I still didn't make the connection. So I tramped the streets for 4 days. I took about 1,500 photographs in 4 days of churches and various things in Rome, and I came back. But I still didn't know what had given me this peace, And it was August, and Whitchurch has a canal, and they had a canal boat rally, and my friend and I went down to the canal boat rally, and it was a glorious, glorious sunny day. And there was a church there called the Beacon, who happened to be having an open air service, and we wandered up and down the canal, and this service was later on in the afternoon, and I had to stop for it, and my friend said, "Oh, we're going home, we've had enough." And I stopped for that service, and it was the Beacon Church that I was with. And I realised as soon as I sat on the grass on this open air service, I realised that this was what I was looking for. And I remember talking to one of the elders and thinking, I have to come back here. I need more of this. I didn't know the words to the songs, but I just knew that I wanted to sing them, and I wanted to be part of this group of people who seemed so happy, and I just wanted to know more. So he invited me to a service the following Sunday, and I went, and I realised that this was where God, this was what I've been looking for. Jesus, God, whatever this person was called, this was where I was meant to be. So I kept coming back. And going week in, week out, and I met people, and they were so lovely, and I just didn't know, well, why hadn't I met these people before? It was just an amazing time in my life. So for the next 6 months or so, life was wonderful. I became a Christian. And the following year I was baptised. But then work still wasn't going very well. I was still struggling with work. I was having to travel. Money was becoming an issue. And I had a relapse, and I started to drink again to cope with things. I'd started a relationship with a chap who was quite abusive, but I now realise was quite a damaged person himself. So 2 damaged people together, it didn't work, and we struggled. And although we did love one another, we just hurt one another more and more. And I remember being in such a state with one thing or another that I came home and I drank, and I didn't know what else to do, because there just didn't seem to be an outlet for what I was going through. And I remember standing with a knife thinking, well, I might as well just end it. I remember standing there very clearly saying this to myself. So I limped on for another couple of weeks. I didn't obviously do what I was thinking of doing. Obviously some person stopped me from doing this, and I was being protected, obviously. And I'd had a week off work, and I went back to work. And halfway to work, I heard a voice calling me and saying, 4 words, and the voice said, "What are you doing?" And I remember thinking, well, I'm just driving to work. What do you think I'm doing? And I just carried on to work. I got to work, parked up, went into work. I got as far as the door, went through the door, and the feeling was just, I was just feeling worse and worse. This is not right, there's something not right here. And I walked through the door, and I just realised there and then that I couldn't do this anymore. And what I'd heard was God's voice telling me that, what are you doing? You don't need to do this. Come, give it to me. I will take it for you, and I will do it for you. I handed my notice in on that job there and then. Within 3 days, I had another job, much less stress, and I found such a peace that I realised that I don't need a good job. I don't need things in my life. I don't need a bigger car. I don't need drink. I don't need anything. And I just needed to listen to God, and I just needed to obey what he wanted me to do. So I gave up the job there and then. I've taken a back seat in my job. I am so much happier. I went straight back to church. I stopped drinking the following Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday night. I stopped drinking, and I've never drunk since. And that was 7 years ago. And I don't own a great deal. I don't have huge amounts of things, to possessions. But what I do have is I have God in my life. And what he's done in the last 7 years has been unbelievable. I have a peace in my life. I have a family. I have friends. And I've found that by worshipping God gives me the peace that I need in my life. And his salvation over me was just, it was unbelievable. Words can't describe what he's done in my life. And words can't describe how I feel knowing that I have God who loves me for what I am, for who I am. It doesn't matter that I used to drink. It doesn't matter that I used to do things wrong. He's forgiven me. He's forgiven all my sins. And I just, the words just take, all I want to say is that I just love him so much. And I just thank him so much for what he's done in my life. And to go from almost wanting to kill myself to being a worship leader and leading people to worship God, the man who died for me, has been the best thing that I could have, well, it's the best thing ever. And I know that I will have eternal life with my God, my Father, my eternal Father, and he will never let me down. He never let me down before, and I realise that now, that he never let me down. Even all those years when I was out in the wilderness, he was always there for me.